Hello everyone. Today we're going to look over this program that we made and kind of explore what's going on behind the scenes because there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. We kind of just threw all this code in here and it worked because of various details that I'd like to cover. So the topics that we're going to cover are the variable types here, which are dictating what these variable names, what type of data they store. We're going to talk about type conversion, which is when one variable type gets changed into another. This is a string, as you can see when I mouse over. There's that little wrench and it says string textbox.text. That's a string. This is a double though. So double parse converted it to a string. Same in here, except this is a string being converted to an integer. So we're going to talk about type conversion. We're going to talk about auto type conversion, which is right here. Going on right here, we have an integer and a double being multiplied into a double. So there's actually more going on behind the scenes that other programming languages won't let you do. And then we're going to talk about string concatenation, which is happening within this show method. Concatenation is bringing two different strings together. So let's jump right into it and start exploring some of these concepts. So the first thing I want to point out is this double variable type. They call it floating point number here. So this double has decimal places. That's the big difference between a double and an integer. And so let me bring in some of this. Let me bring in, actually I'll just type it out here. So let's type out an integer here. Integer 5. So that works. We see just a green squiggle saying we don't use the variable. That's fine. Let's look at a double. We'll call it D. Double 5 works too, which is fine. So a double can store this number 5. Now let's put a decimal on the end of both of them and see what happens. So the integer here cannot store 5.0. And if you want, we can make it 5.1 just to emphasize the point. It can't store this decimal place. Integers, as in mathematics, if you're familiar with the difference between whole numbers and integers, integers in computer science are the same. They only are whole numbers, plus 0 and negative numbers. So you need to use a double variable type to store that decimal place, which leads into what's going on down here. So we can delete these. Actually, before we jump into that, I want to mention one more thing. We can also do 5.1 as a string, but this is going to act very differently than what numbers will act like. So down here we have this plus. That plus, if I put a plus here, when you add two numbers, you're going to get a number as a result. But when you add strings, if I added this variable here to this, it's going to just display, it's going to just append each character to that string. It's not going to do a mathematical operation. So that's kind of the difference between these three types of variables here. So now let's explore what's going on down here, and then we'll come back to this. So here we have a double being multiplied by an integer, and our result is a double. As I'm mousing over, you can see in blue the variable types. Integer, double, 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 integer. So what's actually happening behind the scenes is an auto type conversion, because when you multiply a double, you need to multiply it with another double, or it needs to be multiplied with an integer. So what's actually happening behind the scenes is, let's add this type conversion here. So if you want to convert a variable One way to do it is just putting the variable type you want it to become in front of the variable name, which I've done here. Num items is the variable name of an integer. If I put this double in parentheses in front of it, I'm converting it. Notice how it's a little bit darker. It's saying that cast is redundant, meaning behind the scenes it's already doing that. It's already doing an auto type conversion for us. And you'll notice if we instead tried to convert item price into an integer, we don't see it telling us it's redundant, because that's not what it's doing automatically. It is not assuming item price is an integer. In fact, if we did that, we would be truncating the decimal value behind the scenes. And I'll just show that, how that's working right now. But what it's actually doing is, in this case, this is not how you'd want to program it. And let me show you why. You're losing data when you do that. So let's say item price is 2.2 and number of items is 2. You would expect a multiplication of these two values here to be 4.4. But what we find is it's just 4. It's ignoring the 0.2 when I do this type conversion. If I take that out and do the exact same mathematical operation, we're going to get what you would expect, 4.4, right? And that's because I didn't truncate it. When I convert it to a decimal, it truncates it. But what's happening behind the scenes is an auto type conversion. Num items is being converted into a double so that it can perform this mathematical operation before it displays the total value here. So that's an auto type conversion. Now, going back up here, what's happening with the data that's going inside this text box? So this data that's being put in the text box is always assumed to be a string. Anything that goes into the text box here is a string. So text box item price. So here is the name of the text box. I use the dot property and this text indicator to pull the value of whatever's inside of the text box. And you'll notice when I mouse over this, it says string, so it is a string. What's coming into the text box is a string for both text boxes. And then with the parse function, we can convert this to a double. Now, what's on the right-hand side, the variable type on the right-hand side matches the variable type on the left-hand side, which is item price here is a double. If this was integer, it's going to show us that there's a mismatch, or is it doing an auto type conversion? It's probably doing an auto type conversion. So let's try it with this one here. Should be getting an error. Yeah. What we have on the right hand side here is not matching what's on the left hand side here. So I can't just parse this into a double, because now what I have on the right hand side of the equation is a double, and the left hand side of the equation is an integer. It will not let me do that. So that's why this needs to be an integer and this needs to be a double. Maybe I didn't let the air run long enough here. Yeah, so I think it's doing an auto type conversion here as well. If I cast that to a double, you can see it's redundant. So it sees this and it auto type converted here too. Some programming languages won't do that. Some of the older ones will shoot out an error at you. So C#, it's kind of handling that type conversion for us, which is nice, but it can be abused, and it's important to understand what's happening. And the last detail that we want to cover here is the string concatenation. So when you add two numbers, if you add 1 plus 1, you're going to get 2. But if you add two strings that equal 1 and 1, you're going to get 11. And it's going to be a string. So it's just putting the actual character. It's treating each individual character as its own entity. It doesn't look at it as a number. And so that's what the plus here is doing. It's doing string concatenation. So as I mouse over the plus here, it's talking about operation overload. We don't need to get into the specifics of that yet. We can cover that later. But string operator, it's saying everything on the left of the plus is going to be concatenated with everything on the right of the plus. So we're doing string concatenation here. This is string concatenation. And that is how you can build up a string, build up what you want to show in this message. So that is a good rundown of some of the variable types, some of the conversions, and some string concatenation. So that's all we're going to cover for this, but I wanted to really emphasize how much is actually going on behind the scenes with this very simple code in this very simple form. So hopefully that made sense, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Other than that, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.